Good day everyone, this is Jeric Alvarez and I will be presenting to you my topic on thinking about learning. Let's begin the discussion on Piaget's developmental stages. John Piaget was a psychologist whose research into children's cognitive development has been influential in education. His work is characterized by a sequence of 4 distinct developmental stages ranging from birth through to adulthood, each stage being a particular step in developmental progress. The first stage is the sensory motor, from 0 to 2 years. This stage includes the development of such things as simple reflexes, say for example, sucking, first habits, and object permanence. Intentional actions, for example, shaking a rattle, doing things that are directed towards a goal such as seeking attention, and copying actions, speech, and facial expressions. The second stage is the pre-operational, which is from 2 to 7 years. This stage includes the development of symbolic thought and language through the use of gestures, and development of language and motor skills. In this stage, children are egocentric, they see things only from their perspective. The third stage is the concrete operational, 7 to 12 years. This stage includes logical thinking, conservation, and a shift away from egocentrism to an ability to see other perspectives. And the last stage is the formal operational, from 12 years to adulthood. This stage includes the capacity to think beyond concrete realities and to develop abstract possibilities. There are implications of Piaget's work, and it can be viewed in 2 ways. The first is in accord with his theory that developmental processes occur in steps and that achievement is limited by a child's particular stage of development. A consequence of that view is that there is a real point in trying to teach students skills until they reach the stage at which attaining that skill is deemed to be possible. The alternative perspective is based on a broad set of evidence that suggests so long as necessary prerequisite skills are either available to a child or can be taught, there is no fundamental reason why a child cannot learn those abilities, which Piaget considered to denote a higher stage of mental development. This time, let us go to Vygotsky's cognitive development. Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky proposed a different way of thinking about cognitive development that contrasted to Piaget's view. Vygotsky described learning as occurring in a social context, and so his ideas about socio-cultural and socio-historical influences on cognitive development offered a different perspective on the development of learning. His view was that learning was culturally mediated. Vygotsky described mental ability as comprising 2 distinct functions. The first function is the lower mental functions, those things that are inherited, which are controlled by external events. The second function is the higher mental functions developed through social interaction, which are controlled internally and think like thinking, abstraction, and language, for example. Vygotsky also introduced the idea of zone of proximal development, or the ZPD, which can be characterized as the distance between what children can do by themselves and what they can do with others. In essence, the ZPD is about the difference between what children are able to do with some assistance as opposed to what they are able to do unassisted. The extent of that difference is their ZPD, and it is not the same for all children, or for all children of the same age. Intelligence quotient tests, or IQ tests, were designed by psychometricians as an attempt to measure children's everyday common sense knowledge. However, what comprises intelligence has a big influence on that which is measured. By the time sociocultural factors, and other contextual influences on testing were factored in, IQ as a precise measure of intelligence became hotly contested. The notion of intelligence is much contested field as is illustrated by the nature-nurture debate, whether intelligence is a result of genetic inheritance or environmental influence. It is hard to imagine that intelligence is either fully inherited or solely shaped by environmental factors, since clearly both have an influence. The next topic is about Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences was first laid out in his book Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences. He initially proposed 7 intelligences, which later grew to 8, and recently there has been some consideration of a 9, and suggested that these intelligences rarely operated independently of one another. They were used at the same time to varying degrees and in a complementary fashion. His categories include: first, bodily kinesthetic intelligence. It is the use of mental abilities to coordinate bodily movements. Second is interpersonal intelligence. It is the ability to understand the intentions and motivations of others. Third is the verbal linguistic intelligence, the ability to learn languages and to use language to accomplish certain goals. Next is the logical mathematical intelligence. This is the ability to analyze problems, mathematical operations, and to investigate scientifically. Naturalistic intelligence is the ability to recognize, categorize, and draw upon certain features of the environment. Intrapersonal intelligence, it is the ability to understand oneself, feelings, fears, and motivations. Visual and spatial intelligence is the ability to recognize the use of the patterns of a space. Musical intelligence is the ability to recognize and compose musical pitch, tone, and rhythm. Next is Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence further pushes the boundaries of what comprises intelligence and highlights the difficulties of attempting to define intelligence through one numerical measure. Goleman suggests that emotional intelligence comprises self-awareness, or the ability to read one's emotion, self-management, or the ability to control one's emotion, social awareness, or the ability to react to others' emotion, and relationship management, which is the ability to develop others while managing conflict. Sternberg's triarchic model of intelligence. The triarchic model of intelligence proposed by Robert Sternberg in 1985 is a model which is another example of the rejection of the notion of intelligence as a single, measurable human capability. Sternberg's idea of 3 key components of intelligence offers some interesting ways of thinking about learning. The components are: 1. Analytical intelligence. This is the ability to complete academic tasks that are well-defined and typically have a single correct answer. Creative or synthetic intelligence is the ability to use existing knowledge and skills and to see things from alternative perspectives. And the third one is practical intelligence, which is the ability to understand what needs to be done in a specific setting and then to be able to do it. Now let us talk about taxonomy of educational objectives. Benjamin Bloom was a cognitive psychologist who was interested in thinking and how it developed. His work was based on the measurement of the educational objectives, and he described tasks as being generally derived from one of 3 psychological domains: cognitive, which is the ability to process and use information; affective, attitudes and feelings associated with learning; or psychomotor, or manipulative and physical skills. Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives in the cognitive domain comprise 6 levels, each of which is considered was built up from the previous level. The 6 levels were: 1. Knowledge, It includes remembering information, rote learning, and memorizing. Next is comprehension. It includes grasping the meaning of information, the ability to explain, interpret, or state ideas. Next is application, using information, ideas, and skills in different situations, and problem solving. Analysis includes breaking information down into constituent parts, looking for relationship between parts of information. Synthesis, repacking ideas and information into new forms, creativity, and innovation. And evaluation, making judgments about the worth of material against criteria, reviewing and judging evidence. Also, Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives in the affective domain comprised 5 levels. First is receive. It is to open ideas and the willingness to listen. Respond, actively participate in discussion and willingness to react. Value, decide worth and relevance of ideas, prepared to commit to action. Organize, qualify, and quantify personal beliefs. Offer reasons for personal position. And characterize, consistent behavior in relation to values. Internalize a personal philosophy. Memory. Gilbert Ryle made between knowing that and knowing how. Knowing that equates the acquiring and remembering things as individual pieces of information, for example, knowing the facts. Knowing how, on the other hand, can be described as the ability to use information in practical situations, to put that knowledge to work. Bloom's taxonomy makes clear that moving beyond acquiring information and being able to manipulate and use it as a progressive step in learning is a more demanding cognitive function. It has been well demonstrated that our short-term memory has a relatively limited capacity and, as the term suggests, retains items for only a short period of time. Therefore, if a learner is to retain knowledge for an extended period of time, that knowledge needs to be planted more deeply in a learner's memory. It is in a long-term memory that deeper processing of the original information can occur so that knowledge can be linked, developed, and manipulated in a variety of ways and through a variety of experiences to build deeper understandings of the original ideas and information. Capturing and storing information is aided by a number of other important mental processes. One of these is selection. Selection is the ability to select the appropriate information among the competing stimuli present in the environment. In teaching, we do many things that are designed to help our students select the information that we see as important to their learning a particular concept. This is done through activities such as creating cues, for example, highlighting, bolding, underlining. Also, summarizing the main points and drawing attention to the elements that we think need to be selected to form a base from which students' learning might progress. Chunking is another useful mental process and can be very helpful in not only changing what can be stored in short-term memory, but also the manner in which it may be structured and restructured in a long-term memory. If numbers are chunked in different form, for example, as room numbers, telephone numbers, or some other aid de memoire, the capacity to hold those numbers in short-term memory dramatically changes. Processing is also important and refers to the ways in which information is manipulated and worked through so that it is understood on more than a superficial level in order to carry more meaning for the learner. When we ask students to compare and contrast, or to analyze and describe, we are creating tasks that are designed to encourage processing of information in ways that fundamentally change how the information is structured and connected in their thinking. The nature of processing obviously influences how learners make sense of information. This time, let us talk about deep and surface learning. The nature of processing obviously influences how learners make sense of information. Processing can be an active process in which the learner purposefully attempts to integrate new information with their existing ideas and knowledge. That is what we call deep processing. Or it may involve simply trying to remember facts in unconnected ways, or surface processing. Metacognition is the ability to monitor and control one's own processes of thinking and is perhaps best recognized by the types of questions learners ask themselves when trying to construct meaning from information. We are all familiar with the flood of questions that pop into our head when confronted by challenging information, ideas, or tasks. What does this mean? What do I know about this topic? How does this information link to what I already know? And at the end of a task, questions such as, how well did I complete the task? What else should I have done? What could I have done differently? Am I satisfied with my efforts? These questions are all examples of metacognition, questioning our own thinking, which is very important in extending our learning. The elements of memory. Another way of thinking about learning is to consider some of the elements that influence how information is gathered and used and therefore shape the nature of learning itself. Richard White, in his book Learning Science, which was informed by the work of psychologists such as Gagne, Ausubel, Piaget, Whitrock, and Martin, describes 7 elements of memory that he considered important in helping to describe the sorts of things people know. His 7 elements included strings, propositions, images, episodes, intellectual skills, motor skills, and cognitive strategies. First, strings are a sequence of words or symbols recalled as a whole in an invariant form. Strings are most commonly recognized in the ability to remember such things as poetry, song, telephone numbers, or sayings. An interesting aspect of strings is that they are learned by repetition so that they might be recalled quickly and easily and in the correct form. Therefore, remembering the trigger term or phrase leads to recalling the whole. For example, too many cooks spoil the broth, or 30 days have September, April, June, and November show how one part of the string evokes the whole. Propositions make up a large proportion of people's memories. In colloquial terms, propositions are the things people know. They are known as facts, beliefs, or opinions. As far as memory is concerned, there is no difference between facts and opinions. Both are beliefs which are stored similarly and may be learned simply. Images are mental pictures. However, it is important to recognize that images are not solely visual because they can relate to any of the 5 senses. Images are often stored as archetypes, for example, a flower, tree, or scientist, and many of these are taught to us. Of course, we can also develop images ourselves, as often happens when imagining a particular situation. The description causes us to create an image or snapshot of that situation in our mind. Episodes are records of experience, memories of the events, occurrences we took part in or witnessed. Our whole notion of self is bound up with the recollections of things we have done and experienced. Episodes are important in learning because they dramatically influence students' perceptions of context and the way they function within or feel about that context. Intellectual skills can be categorized into divisions: discriminations, classes, and rules. Discrimination is the ability to determine those things that are the same and those things that are different. Motor skills are memories of how to make muscle movements of a complex form. They share the attributes of intellectual skills of being analyzable into prerequisite movements and once learned of being applicable to a class of tasks. Cognitive strategies are very general skills, each frequently activated in diverse acts of learning and doing. Examples are determining goals, working out options, judging likelihood of success, reflecting of the meaning of the new knowledge, searching out associations between elements of knowledge, generalizing and deducing. Cognitive strategies, then, are the ways in which learners question their learning. And lastly, constructivism. In many ways, the work of Piaget and Vygotsky can be seen as forerunners to the development of what has come to be known as constructivism. To many educators, constructivism offers a common-sense explanation for how students learn. Constructivism suggests that learners construct knowledge by developing mental schemas that allow them to progressively and add new information to existing knowledge, with the result being the development of increasingly complex cognitive structures, the development of personal understanding. Constructivism is a theory of learning that has in some cases been confused with descriptions of teaching. In essence, the link between constructivism and teaching is in how a teaching environment must be organized to support learning in a constructivist way. Some of the important learning principles of constructivism include learning by doing, regulating one's own learning, building individual meaning in a situation or experience, and learning with and from others. And that ends my presentation. Thank you for listening.